Okay, so Megan, we finally got the chance to catch up after you've been moving and I've been traveling. We're finally together again to film this. So, how does that feel, number one?
Oh my gosh, exhausting. I'm glad it's like kind of all over. You've got me in like the in-betweens between moving from one place to another and starting work and like doing all that stuff. So it's like this little week, little moment of brevity, and then it's like I gotta get like right back into it on Sunday. So glad we could connect.
Honestly, I know that my viewers, and I don't even know if you told anyone what you're fully doing, but you told me, and I'm literally, I don't know if I told you this, but I am literally so happy for you and so proud of you.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So
Well, we
I
don't
just
need to
wanted to
keep
get
it a
that out there.
surprise.
I know. I
You
was
can tell
so I
people.
was like, girl, what?
So for the viewers at home that want to be clued in on this inside joke, I guess.
Follow her
Um,
on Instagram and you're gonna see why I said I'm fully impressed. Maybe I'll tell you guys one day, everything, but yeah, no. My girl's going from one extreme to the other, and I love that for her.
I'm thriving. So I'm spending my summer working at a theme park here in Connecticut. So I'm having a very chill summer. I like my first days on Sunday.
Oh my god, fun.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to work again. And then after working a corporate job, which is just hilarious, I'm sure if any of your listeners are working in corporate America, they know. They know the vibe. Anyway, after this summer, I'll be heading to Australia for a year for a working holiday. And then following that, I'll be enrolling in law school. So pretty quick, pretty insane few years that are about to hit me like a bus. Who knows what the future's gonna hold? But here we are. As Carly said, find me on Instagram, find me on LinkedIn, all of that good stuff. But
But
yeah.
tell them your Instagram name so they can actually follow you.
Oh my god, yeah. So my Instagram name is Meg R. Bennett. It's my name. It's easy.
And if you're super lazy, I have tagged her in a bunch of posts that I've made about her in the episode that we filmed together. So you guys can definitely find her there and follow her there. But I would highly suggest that you follow her on her next little life's journey because she went from literally not having a passport to moving to fucking Australia, and I just love that for her.
That is actually very, very true. My passport was issued to me on March 27th of this year, so it expires March 26th, 2034. It has no stamps in it.
And I love that for you. I love
Easily the
that for
most
you.
hilarious thing I've ever done.
Okay, but let's get into the podcast. So, Aileen, our podcast ended up being one of the longest podcasts that I filmed
Oh
to
my god,
date.
yeah. 2
Um,
hours.
2 hours. And I feel like both of us felt the exact same way about her. Um, So, how did you feel I guess, going in because you had no clue, I don't know if you guys know, but, if you're a guest on my podcast, you genuinely have no clue, who I'm gonna talk about, what I'm gonna talk about, male, female, how many people they've murdered, nothing. You're literally going into this just fully trusting me, and I feel like that's, the fun part of it. So, how did you feel just, going into this kinda, blindly?
Going into it blindly, I'll say that I was definitely like nervous because I've listened to a few of your episodes, and sometimes these like killers are a little like they're a little gory, they're a little gross. So I'll say reflecting on the experience, I'm super excited that Eileen's was not like Jack the Ripper level murdery. You know what I mean? Like there weren't a lot of blood and guts and all that gross stuff. Like I can barely do it with American Horror Stories, so so I mean that was my big fear, but I think, once we like kind of got into it and we got to like hear a little bit more about Aileen, hearing that she was a woman, obviously she had my support because I was like, you know what? Some man probably did her wrong. And I was proven right in the end.
Aileen was did wrong by several men in her life. So,
Correct.
um,
Women's rights and women's wrongs. usually being messed with by men, so.
I feel like, and it's not just like you. So, Danny, I don't know if you're watching this, but you're finally getting your little shout out that you wanted. Um, Danny, my personal trainer, he was kind of like, we were kind of discussing it during like one of my sessions, and he was like, how do you feel about like Aileen? Like, he was like, I feel like she didn't deserve as much punishment she got. And I was like, literally, like, that's like me and my friend said the same thing. I was like, you have to listen to the episode, because he hadn't listened to the episode yet. So hopefully he's listening to the episode now and he feels the same way that we feel. But like, I don't know, like,
I
how did you feel about like Aileen and her crimes versus like what happened to her?
I feel that, holistically, when you pull apart and like really look at this, I would say that like Eileen wasn't supported by the system, whether it was the judicial system or our prison system or reform system. Like the goals of reforming somebody and helping somebody, she didn't receive that. She didn't receive like the help that social programs should be giving to somebody in this situation. Because when you trace it all back, she lost a lot of those integral support systems that are supposed to set somebody up to be a functioning, well-adjusted adult, right? She lost her parents, she lost her home. She was like what, essentially homeless before turning 18, and was, having to resort to doing whatever it was to stay alive. And I think, if you're doing that your entire life, you could not have the best choices, the best judgment. You might be going off the deep end in a way. So, I think that like that's a huge piece with Eileen's case, is that she wasn't supported, and it kind of led her to do these things. Like, I think, it's the perfect argument of like nurture versus nature, in the sense where it's like, had she been in a different environment, would she really come out and like done this stuff? Like if she had two parents that were there for her, and she was, financially taken care of, and like da 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 da, and she was like pushed to go through all, school and college and all these things, like, is it reasonable to say that she would have ended up doing the same things? And I just can't fathom that or see that. So I think like that's a big takeaway. I think the other thing about Eileen's that like case that really frustrated me was the fact that like she was almost made out to be an example, in a way where it's like, I think there were a lot of things where maybe if it was a man, not to like put it on there, but like maybe if it was a man, there could have been a little bit more leniency. But I think because, her reputation is she's the first woman doing this, it was sort of like they really threw the book at her and held her to these high standards, which
I feel like that first part, like her being the first, really played a very big role in how they
right?
treated her also.
Exactly. So I think that on top of her being a woman, like when you think about it, like women throughout all of history are held to a different standard, right? Like, I mean, I'm in the middle of like watching House of the Dragon, and I'm like watching this whole situation happen where, spoiler warning for anybody with House of the Dragon, but it's like there's one character where her children, their parentage is being questioned. And it's like a whole thing. And when you think about it, it's like they're coming at her, they're coming at this woman, but like nobody's really like worried about the men in this situation. And it's like, baby, it takes two to tango here. Like, why are we only coming after this gal? And that, like, I feel like is very consistent with like a lot of things you see through history, is that in situations like that, like the man's kind of forgiven, but it's like the woman is the transgressor, regardless of the situation, regardless of the details. And it's like, what are we doing here? So I think like that's where I like have some frustration here, is that it's like, why are women always held to a different standard than men when it comes to, let's compare apples to apples in these types of situations, right? So I don't know. That's
I
that's my
feel
big
like
takeaway.
I feel like women are always held to this higher standard, especially when it comes to like, oh, like I I almost feel like Eileen's killings were also so kind of new to them, because they were used to women killing for passion, essentially. And if you just want me to be honest, I feel like she was either A, killing like out of necessity for like her life,
Right.
or she was B, just killing like because she wanted to. And I feel like they had a hard time wrapping their brains around like, well, she's a woman, like, but she's not like a passion killer. She's not killing these men because they cheated on her. She's killing them because they wouldn't give her money, or she wanted their cars, or she was fighting for her life. And like, I feel like
Right.
they couldn't wrap their brains around the fact that like she's killing for a reason other than like, okay,
He cheated on me or like
yeah, like
whatever.
he cheated on me. He like, so he I think that they couldn't fathom that she was killing for a reason other than that. And I feel like that really swayed like their thoughts on the entire process, like the entire judicial process. I feel like their thoughts were swayed because of that. I also feel like their thoughts were swayed because of the fact that like she didn't really have good representation. She just
Right.
she couldn't afford representation, like let's just be honest. And so she just got like the bottom of the barrel. And I feel like them kind of telling her like, "Oh, just like plead guilty." And then them also not bringing in any of her psychological issues that she had, or any of her childhood, or like anything to justify this is the reason she came out like this, or she has been in psychiatric care before. Because let's be honest, I feel like men who are serial killers, they claim insanity all the time, and she easily could have claimed insanity. But instead, they threw her with like 4 life sentences. What was it, like 4 or 5?
Yeah,
For
it was
death
something
penalty, not
insane.
life sentences. They threw her like 4 or 5 death penalties.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're not getting off. Like, in order to overcome that, you would have to, even if you overcome one, you now have to go through the battle of overcoming the other 4 or other 3 that you have. Like, that's a battle that you're not gonna win. And I feel like once she fully like realized that, like, damn, like this isn't something I'm gonna win, she kind of just gave up.
Right. But yeah, no, I definitely think you make a great point. And like the fact that there wasn't any psychiatric evaluation, like obviously this was a different time in the sense where maybe that wasn't like fully accessible, but still, to look at her history, probably should have come up if you were arguing the case correctly and like doing your due diligence. So I definitely like, she really got the short end of the stick. I feel like she could have had a bet, like had this crime happened in today's day and age, I'm not saying that like I think she would have walked free, but it probably would have been a life sentence in some type of like psychiatric treatment to rehabilitate her, kind of a situation. Like very similarly, if you've ever seen on Apple TV The Crowded Room, like I think that's a perfect like I think mirror to what Aileen experienced in the sense of like, oh, I feel like this is probably what she should have received.
Yeah, I feel like her sentencing was way too harsh for what they gave her. And then I also feel like once she realized that and was just like, I'm just ready to die, like just kill me. I feel like that kind of hurt like me too, because I'm like, they literally made it to where like you wouldn't want to fight for your freedom at that point, because you're never going to get it. You're never going to get off the death penalty. And I just feel like it was a combination of like bad counseling, bad advice that was given to her. And I also feel like the people around her in her life, I can't, I wish I like had her name pulled up, but the lady who adopted her, like, you were just using her. like
Yeah,
like what would possess you to adopt someone in their 40s? Like, you were using her.
which is gross and it should have been questioned in the moment. Like whoever cleared that adoption, my question is why wasn't that being questioned? Like that is weird and gross and kind of icky. Like I think it would be one thing if it was like marriage or a guardianship or like something that like made a little bit more sense than an adoption of somebody that is a literal adult. Like I don't know. Something about that
And
feels like somebody just didn't care at work that day.
on one hand, I'm like, I get why you did it, but on the other hand, in the end, it just ended up like being for absolutely no reason, like, she still ended up, like, I mean, I feel like it didn't really help her. Like, I get why they did it because you couldn't visit her without being a family member, but you only wanted to visit her to get clout from it, essentially. Like, you only
Right.
wanted to visit her for your own personal motivations and gains.
Right.
So, I guess now, segueing from Aileen, how do you feel how do you feel about, like, our justice system kind of as a whole? Because I know earlier that you mentioned, like, it wasn't like the sentence that she received wasn't a sentence for reform. That sentence is a death sentence. Like, that's like, I'm punishing you, I'm throwing the book at you, like, you're never getting out.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, especially as we're last night I watched the presidential debate. So I think that's a amazing question with just like our political climate right now is that I don't really think that our justice system is set up for reform when it comes to these types of crimes. Like, I definitely, like, I want to clarify that I definitely think that if you've done something heinous and wrong, you need to be locked up. But I just personally don't feel that people are naturally evil. I think there are situations and circumstances that lead people to this, whether it is just a mental health issue or trauma or like what have you. And I feel as though that like prisons in so many situations are just kind of like there for people to be caged up and then they get thrown back into society and then they're not taught anything to be better. So then they end up back in jail and it's just this vicious cycle instead of let's heal, let's do the work, let's be better. I also find it to be like really frustrating that like a lot of people when they go to jail after even doing like petty small crimes, it's they're branded a felon and they can't like vote or do certain things or hold certain jobs, and it's like one of those things where it's like,
You
what are
know,
we doing for these
don't get me
people?
started on being a felon in job.
I mean, it's just, again, like, not to excuse any heinous bad behavior, in the sense of like I don't want any victims families to feel that like I'm like saying like yes you were murdered and like your murderer, like obviously not, but like I don't think that the prison system is set up to make people better in a way. Like, let's say that you've stolen a car, you've done the reparation or whatever, and you go to jail for like X amount of time, and then you come back out. And what, like, I guess, like, the thing is, like, what caused you to steal the car is the kind of the motivation you want to look at. If it was money, you've just now been in jail for several years and you're going back out in the world. Now you have this on your record, so you can't get a real job. So you're back in kind of the situation of like, I got to do whatever it takes to get money. If it's like just for fun or if it's vindictive, like, I don't know, maybe that's a different whole area, but like I don't think that like the prison system and the judicial system is like truly set up to help the majority of people come out and be better people.
Successful. I
Right.
feel like I know there's like halfway houses and things like that, but I feel like after you've been in jail for like X amount of time, I feel like they should help you with like job placement and
Right.
maybe like finding a house, like putting you up in like helping you find like that halfway house or like putting you up in a halfway house until like you kind of get back on your feet, because it's more so like our tax dollars are paying for you to be in prison. What's
Right.
another 2 years added on to that to help you get your life back together? We're already
Correct.
spending the money. Like, let's just be honest.
Right. And I think like in situations like that, it could be a little bit easier for people to like come out of jail and be successful. Again, like,
Like a transitional program.
right. Again, it's like all circumstantial in the sense that I also feel like while you're in jail, you should probably be evaluated. And if it's like you have no remorse for your actions and you're like, yeah, I stole that car and I'm going to steal it again, you just kind of have to stay there until you, like, it's like timeout in kids, right? Like, if a kid draws on the wall, you put him in timeout. And if you take them out of the timeout and they immediately go back to drawing the wall, then like they clearly didn't learn their lesson in timeout.
We
So
need
it
to figure out what the problem is.
right. It's like, why are you doing this? Is it because you want to color? Great. I'm going to invest and get you things to color with. You can't color on the walls. You can color here, and that's okay. So, I mean, I don't think that, like, prison really sets up those that are incarcerated to, like, really feel remorse and feel forgiveness. I think, like, some people end up being there, and it's like, I'm just bitter and angry, and I'm going to continue to be bitter and angry, and I'm going to get out, and I'm going to be bitter and angry. So I think that, like, the prison system as a whole probably needs, like, a little bit more psychiatric help, mental well-being, and then in that, life coaches that are going to, like, teach you about finances and how to get a job and partnering with. I think, like, one of the greatest things would be, like, actually partnering with businesses that are, like, desperate to hire, for, like, these jobs that nobody wants. Like, nobody wants, like, the midnight gas station attendant job. Like, maybe that's
Nobody
where,
wants to work the night shift at McDonald's either.
right? And I mean, I get that, like, those aren't fun jobs and, there's not a lot of money in them, but, like, maybe
You
that's
got
where
to
they
start
start.
somewhere, like,
Right,
realistically.
right. Because that's definitely not a job that a high school kid should have, right? That's not really a job that you think, like, anybody in school is gonna have, especially because I'm pretty sure, like, when you're in high school, there are, like, rules, and you can't, like, work too late or something
Yeah,
weird
you
like
can't
around
work
it.
after like a certain time. I don't know if it's in like every state, but I know in most states,
Right,
if you're in high school, there's like a certain like time you have to be off.
right, yeah, you, like, can't work after, like, 10 or 11 or something weird, and unless you have, like, special permission. I don't know, but yeah, so, I mean, yeah. Anyway, that's my soapbox of my frustrations with the judicial system, is that I don't think that it really, well, I guess it's more the prison system. I mean, watching the debate, one of the big things with that they're talking about in our justice system is, like, abortion rights and everything, and it's frustrating to watch that. And it's like, why are a bunch of these 80-year-old men trying to talk to me about my body and my rights? Which just, it was truly infuriating to watch that debate last night as a young person, as a woman, to the point where I think I didn't watch it for the whole thing because I was just so irate at a certain point. So I don't
I
know.
only caught the end of that debate, and the end part of it that I did catch, um, it was basically them like asking like, oh, like how are you gonna like mitigate concerns about your health and age? And I felt like one person deflected from it
Mhm.
and talked about everything but what the question was about. And I feel like the other person, although they answered it, I still like, I get that you're doing all those things, but I still don't want someone that age to be making important decisions. And the reason that I say that isn't because of your age, it's quite frankly because of your life experience. If you just
Right.
want me to be honest, as someone who is that age, their life experience is a lot different than someone who is my age or like even your age and their life experiences. Like just being completely honest, like a 30, 40-year old, even a 50-year old, their life experiences are different. And like if you're 80, like babe, you lived through fucking Jim Crow. Damn
Right.
near. Like you damn near lived through Jim Crow. And like let's just be honest, I don't want anybody who thought that segregation was okay to be in charge of me.
Correct. I agree. I think it's funny that you said you and me, like, we aren't, like, maybe 2 years apart.
We're
We're both
literally like 2 years apart. But
Gen
it's okay.
Zs. But no, I agree. I think, like, and then I think it definitely speaks, like, to speak to it in a more, like, microcosm instead of, like, this political entity as a whole, is that, like, you think about, like, corporate America, again, to, like, relate to what we kind of started this whole chat with, is that you have a bunch of people that are older that are sitting in senior positions, making decisions, da da da, and then you have younger people. And I think it speaks to an issue that a lot of people that, like, hold social media roles and, like, these jobs get frustrated about, because it's like you have to go through a million approvals to get yes, and by the time you get that, the trend that they wanted to capitalize on is dead, and you can't make the person up at the top who grew up with, like, 3 channels on their TV.
Understand why you need this
Right.
big of a budget for social media, but it's
Or
like
why
that's that.
it's like making this silly TikTok isn't gonna end the world. Like, we don't need 8 million people to say yes to it. Like, use your best judgment kind of a situation. Like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know. I think it speaks to everything, where I think a bunch of young people are frustrated with this older generation kind of being a stop, lock, and away. And like, not to like blanket statement it, because I will say that there are definitely people like older that are like very welcoming of like hold the door open and like let you lead. But I think like to speak to it as a collective is that
Yeah,
I don't think like I think they all hold this power, think they're right, and they're not really willing to listen to
let
us
go of the power.
until they like can't figure out how to use a printer or something insane like that, or they don't know how to like screen record on their phone, and
Or
it's like
they don't know how to scroll down to finish reading the rest of the thing that the document told you to read.
right. No, exactly. So I mean, it's very frustrating to watch like certain people do certain things, and then it's like, man, I get paid like this much compared to their this much, and it's like,
And I'm like literally having to help you with your job.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's, I feel like that's like corporate America. Like,
I mean, I think it's corporate America, but I also think it speaks to like the holisticness of the US, because like when you think about it, like something like very like pinpoint to me is when I think about LGBT rights. And I remember very distinctly for like me and my generation, like I like for clarity, like grew up on Tumblr where it was like a no-brainer that like anybody should be able to marry anybody as long as they're both consenting adults and in love and all that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, but for whatever reason, something that monumental or something that like basic wasn't a monumental like yes until what was it? I think like 2013,
it
2012.
was
Like,
2015. I remember from me and Mason's interview because
ah,
I didn't realize that it was like it that 2015 was not that long ago. Like
I
that's just
graduated high school in 2015, so it was
yeah,
not
like
long ago at all.
I graduated like 2 years after. So I'm like, it's not like I think even that conversation with him of like realizing like, damn, like one, why the fuck did there need to be a law for that? Like, why
Right,
are you trying to manage who I'm marrying? But honestly, in hindsight, having them pass a law saying, oh yeah, you can marry someone of the same sex, kind of, I feel like it all should have raised red flags for us. And at it to the point of saying it should have raised red flags of like, why are you telling them that they can do something that they should have never had to be told that they can do? Like, I
right.
should be able to marry who the fuck I want to marry. Like, let's just be honest.
Why
I
are
feel
we
like
being
that
denied this
should have
basic human
been,
right? Yeah,
yeah, like, I feel like that should have been our first red flag to like, wait, they're like actually trying to manage our lives. So, like, honestly, like, thinking about the fact that that law got passed in 2015, it doesn't surprise me that they don't want abortion rights now. Like,
right,
I think the thing that's upsetting me about that issue, though, is the fact that you're a man, number one. You've never had to push out a baby. You've never had to deal with a period. You've never had to go through the emotional ups and downs that come with having periods and babies. And now you're all of a sudden, let's not even go there yet. You aren't even the primary parent in most cases. Like, let's just be
right,
honest, like men usually are not the ones who are taking off work and missing work and quitting school to raise kids. They still get to live their lives, which is why I feel like most men now, like even with dating, they're like, yeah, of course I want to have kids. And women are like, I don't want to have kids because like I want to live my life. And I feel like men can't understand that. And it's like, well, I would be the primary parent and you would still get to live your life. You're still going to get your boys' night. You're still going to get to climb the corporate ladder. Like, you're not going to have to give up your job. Every time the kid's sick, you're not going to have to call out. Like, that's all going to be
right,
on me. And then you put that into the argument of 50-50, baby, I'll live by myself, kid free.
right.
I
No,
would rather pay
exactly.
100% than go 50-50 with you.
Oh,
But I also feel like that speaks to this older generation of like, why do you feel like you can have so much autonomy over my body? Like, why do you feel like you deserve that much autonomy over me to be able to tell me when I can't have kids, and if I don't want the child, you're telling me I have to have them? Like, the amount of kids in foster care, the amount of kids like who don't get adopted every year, like, and
Right.
you just want like
And I mean, those kids that were adopted could easily be more Aileens. You know what I mean? So,
I feel like that I actually wanted to discuss this on a podcast. We can discuss it here.
oh my god, perfect.
I wanted to actually discuss abortion rates versus serial killers,
Okay.
because I do feel like it has a big play on it. I feel like pre um pre abortion, I feel like a lot more serial killers came out because you were being forced to have kids that you didn't necessarily want, and you were having them and maybe not raising them in the best conditions, as Aileen, as many other serial killers. And I'm not saying that this is always the reason that people turn into serial killers, but having kids and then raising them in poor conditions, not being able to take care of them, not loving them because you don't even know who you are as a person, I feel like that has a really big effect on like how these kids turn out. And I feel like in the next couple of years, I wouldn't say in the next couple of years, I would say probably in like the next 20 to 30 years, we're gonna see the effects of all these states banning abortions and all these kids growing up in homes that they they weren't necessarily like loved and treated well in. And I feel like you're gonna start to see the rise of like serial killers again, because like, let's be honest, the 80s, 70s, that was a wild ass time. They had serial killer after serial killer after serial killer, like some of the biggest serial killers. The person that I'm talking about, on the 11th, 93 people, no
Oh my
remorse,
goodness.
no remorse. He literally said he enjoyed it. He
Disgusting.
talked about it. He talks about it in such detail. He was able to
Yeah.
draw pictures of them. He was able to draw pictures of them,
Ugh.
tell you their names. He literally even down to, mind you, they're talking to him about this like 20, 30 years later. And he still has this vivid of a memory of doing this to these people. It's
No.
insane. Like,
Gross.
one of them, he literally was able to tell them what she ate last. And that's how they identified her.
Ew.
Yeah,
Ugh.
the stomach contents matched exactly what he told them that she had ate.
Ugh. Well, I won't be tuning into that podcast, but I definitely agree with you. I think that I feel like there'll be like kind of multiple fallouts from these increased abortion
I feel
bans.
like in the next like 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, we're gonna see the effects of banning abortions. And it's because you're raising these kids in environments that aren't the best, and you're just being like, okay, well, like, you have to have these kids, but then you're not giving anybody any resources to raise them in a good environment.
Right. So, like, I think we'll see that with this increase in serial killers, or we'll see kind of the adverse effects, which I think worries a lot of like very traditionalists, which is people not having babies and the end of the traditional marriage and like all of that. So I think, and I feel like that's probably where we're trending, which is going to lead to a decline in population. So I think we'll see other effects from that and frustrations. But yeah, so yeah, I think that either way, in instating this abortion ban is probably not good
I
for.
feel like it's not going to really work out for them the way that they want. I feel like they've noticed that the population is declining, but like, let's be honest, that's because everything's expensive. Like, people
Right.
can't afford kids, people can't afford houses,
People
people
can't
can't
even
afford a
afford to
kid and a
date.
house at the same time. Like, a kid and a house, that's pushing it.
Right. I mean, like, I was having this conversation with somebody about like, and I'd like seen several friends in like a week, like, and so it was like multiple dinners that I was going out with these friends, and I like had the conversation, and I was like, it's expensive having friends. I was I was like, I've spent so much money, and all I've done is gone out to dinner with like one other person, and I'm like, I'm literally paying for myself, not pay. And I was like breaking it down, and I'm like, I'm not even getting a beveragino. I'm like, I'm here with my water and my entree. and it's still somehow costing me like 40-50 bucks. So I mean,
I see why people aren't dating, because
right?
imagine like having to be like the guy in that situation and like paying for both. And it's like, damn, like I don't even know if this shit's gonna work out. And now I gotta treat her to dinner. I'm like,
Right?
then how do you like it's kind of like how do you get to know someone when you can't get to know them because prices literally everything is so expensive.
Right.
And at this point, I'm like,
It's like, is it
can the
worth it?
president help us? Like, let's just be honest. Like, I feel like yeah, no, I feel like that goes back to like corporate greed at that. Like, I feel like the people at the top have been in power for so long, and they are like, I want more money and more money and more money and more money. And it's like, you're literally about to die. I'm not trying to be
Right?
funny, but you're literally about to die, and there's no way you're ever going to spend all that money. And if you have kids, there's no way they're going to spend all that money. So why are you taking from me to line your pockets when you don't necessarily need to do that?
Right. And I saw something similar online. It was like this discourse around Kim Kardashian, and it was like the social responsibility shift of the billionaire, and how like years and years and years ago, billionaires were giving back to society, right? Like you think about Rockefeller and how like he was insanely wealthy, but he gave money back to education and the arts and, all of these things that like matter to him. And like built a foundation to continue to give and to continue to share that wealth. And they're like taking these billionaires from that time period where they gave back to society and comparing it to those now, and how they're not, or at least they're not as impactfully, right? You think about like, obviously you have Bill and Melinda Gates and the Obamas who do have foundations and do give back and do philanthropic work, but then you have to look at like the Kardashians, and it's like
Yeah.
you have the frustration when it's like Kylie is taking her private jet from San Francisco to LA, and it's like, did you really need to do that for an
You
hour?
know,
You know what I mean?
I find that hilarious. And the reason why I find it hilarious is because we as like average people get told carpool. It's let's save the
Right.
planet, when we're not even the ones contributing to that shit. Like,
Correct.
it's your private jets to go 30 minutes up the road, babe. It's
Right.
your helicopters to fly into the city when you live 10 minutes outside the city because you didn't want to sit in 40 minutes worth of traffic. Like, that's where these CO2 emissions are coming from. It's not coming from my Ford.
Right. And I mean, like, I definitely get like the frustration of it. And like, I think about like certain artists who do a tour bus, like one of my favorite bands, Greta Van Fleet, like they use a tour bus and they tour through the whole country when they go on these things. But then I think about like somebody like, and I know we'll probably get hate for this when I say her name, but Taylor Swift, where she is using her private jet to go like from place to place. And it's like, I understand that as a megastar, her getting on like your basic Delta flight and sitting in first class is definitely not going to happen. But like, why like, is it more economical? Is it better for the environment for her to be using this jet to go to city to city to state that's like maybe only a 2 to 3 hour drive in a way? Like, would it make more sense for this girl to just sit on a really long bus ride and call it a day? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
because I mean, like her stuff has to get there too, and your stuff is driving. And I feel like, I mean, obviously, like Taylor Swift, Beyonce, she does the same thing. And like, I will say, I do know that Beyonce and Jay-Z, they give tons of scholarships all the time. So I will say that I know that they give back in their own ways, but I feel like it's that sweet spot of like, I'm not telling you to do like what to do with your money because you earned it fair and square, but I also am to the point to where I'm like, you guys are telling me that I need to save the planet, but you're not actively doing anything to help the situation.
right.
So why is it my responsibility, and why is it not everyone's responsibility?
Correct. And I think like that's where a lot of like the working class, the middle class, like that area, they get frustrated. Where it's like, yes, I recycle all the time in my house, but then it's still like you're being like you accidentally throw like one thing into the trash and it becomes like this whole thing. But in reality, it's like you actively work to try to reduce your carbon footprint. You actively like try to make things better, but it's the way that those in power, the 2% corporations that they're operating, that it's like really like kind of hammering in on the environment. And like a great point you make is which reminded me of like the Maui fires and how like what was it? I think it was like Dwayne the Rock Johnson basically was trying to like ask the general public for donations, but then like he didn't donate or something was like the big controversy. And it's like this man has been in tons of blockbusters. He had a whole like wrestling career. He literally is on Disney's paycheck. Like, why isn't he?
Why are you
Why
asking
isn't?
me for
Yeah,
money? Why can't you donate? And I feel like, once again, it's that sweet spot of like, I don't want to tell you what to do with your money, but why are you asking me for mine? And you know that the general public is struggling right now. Like,
right,
I don't think, I guess it's because they're not here struggling with us that they're
right,
like, oh, like, I mean, they're still finding money to go to tours and they're still finding money to go on vacation. So, like, why can't they donate? But then it's also like, just like I'm not watching your pockets, like, don't watch mine.
right. And I mean, I
Like, what
when
do
I
you
think
want me to
about
do?
it,
Just work and go home?
right,
And
and that's
honestly,
not
that's
life.
what a lot of people do. They just work and go home now
Right.
because it's expensive to have a third spot.
Yes, it's expensive to have a third spot. It's expensive to live life. And then it's like I think about a lot of people where like I remember Harry Styles tour and how extravagantly priced those tickets got. Like it was insane. Like I think people were making jokes about how you have to pay rent to go to Harry's house, like kind of a thing, because that was the name of the tour. And I was like thinking to myself, I was like, that's a lot of money. And like it was even to the point where when I was looking at tickets, I was like, I literally can't drop this. Like it would actually throw off my entire like ability to like
Pay for anything.
survive financially, right? It's like between like my rent and my like monthly expensive is I is like this chunk of money, although I have it, I don't have it. And I
You
think
can't
like
afford it. Just
right,
because you have it doesn't mean you can afford to drop it.
right.
And I feel like that that honestly, one thing I will say about Beyonce's tickets, they were very, very well priced. Usher, on the other hand, I wanted to go to that concert so bad. I wanted to go to the Vegas residency. The resellers got the tickets, they were expensive. So I was like, okay, he's having a tour, let's go to that. He literally dropped the tour tickets. Mind you, I was looking at pre-sale prices. I said, what the fuck?
That was
I
very
literally, I called my friend because me and my friend were gonna go together. I was like, we should like run it back. Like, let's go together to another concert. 3P. And we were like, what the fuck?
yeah. I think a
When
lot of
I
people
see those
experience
tickets, $600, and you were in like section 300.
yes. You can't even see them.
Be serious. You're an ant. Be serious right now. Like, Beyonce's tickets were not that expensive.
Yeah.
Be serious. Like, you're not Beyonce. Like, I love Usher. I think he's an amazing artist. I think he gives the energy when he performs, but you're not Beyonce. And
Right.
Beyonce wasn't charging those prices.
Well, I think we've experienced something similar too. Like very recently, the big tour that just came out was Sabrina Carpenter's tour, and I feel like I'm a fan. So I was like, okay, like fortunately, the way that her dates lined up is that all the U.S. dates are going to be when I'm out of the country. So I was like, okay, like when she drops international dates, I'll look for Australia tickets. But I was watching the whole situation go down, and it was like longtime fans that had pre-sale codes, and then like these Spotify first fans, and like da 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 were like going to get initially priced tickets, which I think were like pretty reasonably priced from what I remember, but because of the demand, the things were skyrocketing. And I was like,
When resellers get tickets, they skyrocket. So, like,
right.
for his tickets to have already bid that price before resellers got them, I was like, when the resellers get them, they're going to be 1,200.
Yes. And I like looked at the Connecticut show that she's having, and I was like looking at like the one or two like seats left, and it was like $1,400. And I was like, what? So yeah. This is a total tangent though from whatever it was.
Yeah, no, we fully went on a whole different tangent. But I do feel like this has been a very good conversation, just like about Aileen and about America's justice system, just in general, about the current state of our
Right.
democracy, if we want to still call it that.
Right. And I think it like really brought up some good points in the sense of like, you know, that old quote of like, if you don't like learn history, you're like doomed to repeat it. And I feel like we are kind of on the precipice of needing to like review a lot of these lessons before we like get too far into the repeating it part of this, right? So that's to say.
But this has been super fun. This was a great conversation. I'm so happy that we finally got the time to do this.
Me too.
But guys, thank you so much for tuning in to me and Megan. We love you guys, and subscribe, like the channel if you like this video. Leave a comment on some of your thoughts that we discussed. But, you know, my little sleuths, like I always say, stay curious, stay safe, and stay suspicious. I will see you guys on my next podcast episode, which drops on July 11th, and I can't wait to meet you there. Bye! Bye!